to look forward, even big picture, like this season has been dubbed the year of the big in college basketball. At least it was in the preseason with the Almanac, which is this obviously great college basketball preseason magazine. K-State's in a position where I think they're probably going to end up closer to a 3 or a 4 seed. And if they ended up having to play a team like, I don't know, Indiana in the second round and Trey Jackson Davis is your matchup, I would be terrified of having to go up against someone like TJD if I was a K-State fan, because like Trace has shown over the last 2 weeks that he can go for 25 and 20 or 30 and 15 at any time you want.
It's scary to think about because, I mean, you think of teams that are lurking in some of these spots. And again, this is a long way out. I mean, UConn is one of them with Sonogo, but also like North Carolina is flirting around with it again. And I can't imagine how K-State would have any way of stopping Armando Bacot. Like there are a lot of teams and people will know these teams because they're big name schools that are out there right now that are going to be flirting around, that 6 to 7 seed line, or maybe even lower than that, like with, in a 10 range, that you could get a really bad matchup. And that at this point is, I think, the only thing that would hold you back from thinking that K-State is a second weekend team without any doubt. Because if they get a good matchup, I don't see anybody beating this K-State team, because we've talked about it. Noel and Johnson are going to be the two best players on the floor in a lot of games they play. The only thing that K-State is really missing now is just one big that you can rely on that doesn't have to play all-world defense and just shut guys down at the rim, but at least there needs to be that threat. And against teams that have legitimate, like, big men inside, K-State has really struggled this year in that regard.
And just to kind of go back to the bracket thing, and I hate how college basketball discussion and dialogue for much of the year turns into bracket breakdowns and projections. And I'm not even someone who likes to look at bracketology at this point in the year. I don't really like looking at it until, I don't know, like mid to late February, because I feel like that's when we really get a good picture of where teams are. K-State is right now projected to be on the 3 line. So you're looking at a 6-11 matchup right in the second round.
Yeah.
So teams on the 6 line,
I just looked. One of the teams on the 11 line right now is Kentucky. So Oscar Tshiebwe would also be a problem. That's what I'm talking about with this. And I'll let you go after this and with your point. But like, that's what I'm talking about is, unfortunately, the teams that are, I guess, underachieving, a lot of the time teams underachieve in college basketball is because college basketball ultimately is like, you need good guards. Like you need guards that can score and make plays. So these teams that underachieve at points in the regular season are the teams that are typically built around big men, because if those big men aren't going off and having unstoppable performances, and that's why Indiana's been better lately, because Trace Jackson Davis is playing even better than he was. Obviously, Purdue, like, nobody can stop Zach Edey, but those teams built around big men, they will have moments where they slide. And we saw that with Kentucky. Like, they had to figure some stuff out with guard play. And that's why K-State might end up getting one of those really bad matchups in the second round, whether they're a 2 or a 3.
Yeah, so just like looking at teams on the 11 line, and this is from Bracket Matrix, like Maryland doesn't really have a great big, but they do have some good guard play. Northwestern doesn't really have a big that they should be scared of. Neither does Nevada. Ohio State has Zed Key, and I question if Ohio State's really actually going to get in at this point, considering the struggles that they've had. They're not projected by a lot of people to get in right now. They're flirting with last 4 in territory. But to look at like the 7 line, so if K-State were to fall a little bit and these teams were to hold serve, listen to the teams on the 7 line. Illinois, Dane Danger. I know he's not a big name, but he's a thicker body. He's someone who's fairly skilled. Like, I don't think that that's a great matchup for K-State on the inside. Indiana, we talked about Trace Jackson Davis. You pointed out North Carolina and Armando Bacot. That sounds terrifying to me if I was a K-State fan. In Michigan State, they've got Matty Sissoko, who's not very good, but like good athlete, thick, is really physical. And that's just another guy like you don't really want to have to go against, I think, if you're K-State. And, you know, I've said this in the past on the podcast. I've said this to other people evaluating this Kansas State team. I think there's a very good chance, like, you get to the NCAA tournament, they're going to have the 2 best players on the court, and Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. And I think Keontae's been listed as a midseason transfer All-American by a few outlets, and I know Marquise was just listed as a second-team All-American by the Athletic midseason team. So that kind of holds true with what those guys have done this year, and if they continue to maintain that production, it's going to continue to hold true. But all of that can be thrown out the window immediately when the other team has a dominant big man like a TJD, like an Armando Bacot, because it becomes so easy for that big to just go for 30 and 15 against a team like K-State. Now, K-State can kind of scheme those guys out on the other end with their offensive ability. And those guys maybe lack of ability on the defensive end to guard ball screens and step out on the perimeter and do those different kinds of things, right? But at the same time, I don't know if I think K-State's elite enough offensively to scheme those guys out, if that makes sense. So I'm really interested to see what happens. And I think K-State's in an interesting spot where matchups are going to become really important to them, particularly in this year of college basketball in the NCAA tournament, because there are so many great bigs across the country. And the NCAA tournament comes down to matchups every single year for every single team. But I agree with you. I think this is a team that you should feel good about them making it to the second weekend if they don't have to go against a big across them on a bracket that is really gifted and really talented. And maybe K-State evolves and kind of figures some of these things out. Think back earlier in the year, they really struggled with turnovers, and they've really kind of improved on that area. So if maybe Naquan Talon turns into a better rim protector, maybe they're able to do some things with maybe Agiola, and maybe David Gassan's reemergence into the rotation is something that becomes really valuable for them.